Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elisa Joseph, Director of Programs for the U.S. Black Chambers. Welcome to our session, Utilizing SBA Recovery Funds, sponsored by Wells Fargo. Last week, we saw the reappropriation of funding for small businesses under the CARES Act. This Monday, additional funds are being made available to the SBA, banks, minority and community banks, CDFIs, and fintech lenders. Judging from the last round, we don't know how quickly these funds will be distributed. We want you to be ready and armed with information for a successful application process. Today, we are joined by Cathy Cook, Public Affairs Specialist for the SBA, and Lisa Smith, Executive Director, Bowie Business Innovation Center, to share information about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan and available technical assistance to help you submit a complete and tight application. I'd like to remind you that you can submit questions to us using our form at usblackchambers.org/cares-act/, and you can see that address on the slide. Let's jump in right now and meet our guest. Cathy Cook, our first guest, is a Public Affairs Specialist for the U.S. Small Business Administration's Office of Disaster Assistance, Field Operations Center East in Atlanta, Georgia. Cathy disseminates SBA's disaster assistance information to media outlets, elected officials, SBA partners, and the public. She provides details about disaster declarations through press releases, town hall meetings, media interviews, and congressional briefings. She also participates in webinars, working on innovation projects, and promotes disaster preparedness. Through her office, she handles disaster declarations in 27 states, Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Cathy, welcome to our chat. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Elisa, and I'm happy to be able to explain what SBA is offering for the coronavirus economic disruption.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. So just tell us a little bit about the programs themselves, particularly what the differences are.
SBA offers two types of disaster loans for the coronavirus. One type is called an Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Those loans are for working capital, and they're offered directly from SBA. The other type of loans most people have heard of are the Paycheck Protection Program, otherwise known as PPP, and those loans are offered through SBA lenders. And when I say SBA lenders, I mean SBA-approved lenders, and SBA guarantees the loans. So there's two avenues for recovery or for working capital for the coronavirus situation.
That's great. And we're going to move to a slide, Cathy, that talks a little bit about the EIDL loans. Can you give us an explanation about the EIDL advance process itself?
Absolutely. The advance is based on the number of employees a small business or a nonprofit has. This funding will allow the business owner to apply for $1,000 per employee with a maximum of $10,000. These loans are forgivable, which means they do not have to be repaid. So small businesses and nonprofit organizations can apply for an SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and as a component of it, check a box and ask for the advance. The advance is for working capital. It can be for payroll. It can help with any of the bills that the business has. However, because it's a forgivable loan, if the business applies for a PPP loan, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, this amount will be deducted from the eligibility. Because if you use it for payroll and the PPP loan is for payroll, then that's a duplication of benefits. Again, the big difference in this and other loans is it's a forgivable loan, which does not have to be paid back.
And Cathy, when people are looking to apply, different from the bank, where do they go? What website do they use for the EIDL loan?
SBA has several different websites. You can go to sba.gov/disaster, and there's a big banner at the top that says COVID relief -19, and that's where you want to submit your application. So you would click onto that particular section. And the application process has been very streamlined. So you would put the name of the business, the trade name, number of employees, and answer various questions regarding any bankruptcy, judgments, how long the business has been in operation. And then toward the end, again, you want to check the box that says that you're interested in the advance, the up to $10,000 advance. The financial information you need is you need your gross sales, your cost of goods sold, you need the number of employees, and your banking information.
That's great information, Cathy. Thank you so much. And so I'd like to now invite our next guest, Lisa Smith, who is a nationally recognized mentor for entrepreneurs and developers of award-winning business accelerator programs. She is the founding director of the Bowie Business Innovation Center, or the Bowie BIC, a hub for entrepreneurship and business acceleration in Prince George's County, Maryland. Bowie BIC provides business scale-up resources, including office and collaborative workspace for technology companies and government contractors through its operation on the campus of Bowie State University. Bowie BIC ranks as the largest business accelerator program in Prince George's County and the 11th largest business accelerator in Maryland. Bowie BIC received the International Business Innovation Association 2020 Most Innovative Entrepreneurship Center of the Year Award for its 8A Accelerator Program for government contractors participating in the U.S. Small Business Administration's 8A Business Development Program. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Lisa, it is great to be with you all today. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I know that your team at the Bowie Business Innovation Center has been helping business owners prepare information for their application. So besides the geography, because you all are located in Maryland and primarily serve Prince George's County, what other technical assistance centers like yours, what are they doing to provide virtual assistance since a lot of us now can't meet face-to-face?
Well, and the way that the system is set up is it's pretty resilient. It works in person and it works online. And what the professional counselors at the small business development centers, the women's business centers, the veterans outreach centers, they've all moved their counseling online. So things have really not let up at all as far as they're concerned. They are knee-deep in working with clients who have lots and lots of questions about how to access the different types of relief funding. So first message is you don't have to meet across the desk. You can certainly meet by scheduling a time on the phone with these folks. And Bowie BIC has always taken the position that we needed to be a real hub, as you said in that nice introduction, for our companies. And so we're lucky enough to be a business accelerator program that also has on-site counselors from these particular agencies. But we're not unique in that sense, because if you dig a little deeper, you'll see that SBA really has 6 offices across the U.S. and they're supported by a whole lot of resource partners, which includes all of these mentors. These are all resource partners, and the resources that we are enjoying here in Maryland are available literally across the country. In fact, the SBA website will provide you almost like right on the home page. It has a little tab that says local assistance. So any of the folks that are listening who want to say, how can I get in touch with a resource like the Small Business Development Center or the Women's Business Centers or the Veterans Business Outreach Centers, you can go right to the SBA website and they will give you a list by state, so they're not hard to find. And I have to say, from Bowie Bick's experience, these are some of the finest professional counselors that I have worked with anywhere in the world. They really know their stuff, and they're just what our businesses need right at this moment. With so many options, everything moving very fast, you need somebody who's staying current, who can give some great advice. So I would heartily recommend, just, if you don't know where your resources are locally, SBA's got a complete directory on their website. So yeah, so what our clients have been doing is helping our companies navigate through the different programs. I know that, our Small Business Development Center counselors are actually walking people through their applications to be sure that they have all the pieces. And many of these counselors have backgrounds in banking as well as in business. And so that's very helpful to any of the folks that would want to access these free services. And these are free services available literally across the country. So this is a resource that I really encourage all of your folks who are listening to take advantage of, because it's a great example of how the government is helping companies one by one.
Lisa, I would agree, and we're going to come back in a little bit to being able to share, some of these resources that you're talking about. And I think the best part is that they are free, because a lot of this has been paid for by taxpayer dollars. So we definitely want everyone to take advantage of it, right?
It is really, really easy to do.
Yep.
So I can't stress that enough. And it's imperative that you do it too, because in these fast-moving times with things changing, you want to get a hold of the people who are really have their finger on the pulse of what's changing and happening.
Yep, and to that point, I can say for myself and for what we're doing at the U.S. Black Chambers, we're literally every day, looking at new things coming on board, trying to integrate it into our website as well as into these webinars that we're doing. And so one of the things I do want to sort of clear up in particular as we look at the next slide, and Cathy, perhaps you can help us with this, is can we talk about what businesses are eligible to apply for the EIDL loans and how it differs from PPP?
Certainly. The small business disaster loans, known as the economic injury disaster loans, are for small businesses, small agricultural cooperatives, small aquaculture businesses, and private nonprofits. The definition of a small business for the coronavirus is going to be any business that has less than 500 employees. That would be a simple way for us to determine whether or not you're eligible. However, if you have more than 500 employees, you would go to SBA's website and look up your North American Industrial Classification System code. That code will provide the maximum revenue or the maximum number of employees that a particular industry can have and still be considered a small business. So it's possible to have more than 500 employees in a category and still be considered small. So that's the first thing. Nonprofit organizations are any organizations that are not tied to the government. So it wouldn't be a local health clinic, and it would have to be a private nonprofit. And that can be anything from an art gallery to Boys and Girl Scouts to a medical clinic that's not tied to the county or the city or the state. So basically, almost every type of small business and nonprofit is eligible to apply, including now religious organizations. So churches are eligible. The second component is that you have to be in operation prior to February 1st, 2020. And basically, the difference between the economic injury disaster loan and the payroll protection program is the use of the funds. With economic injury disaster loan, the funds are for working capital, and that would include payments on fixed debt, payroll, accounts payable, and all the bills that the business could have paid had the disaster not occurred. With the payroll protection program, the majority of the funds, 75%, must be used on payroll, and the rest can be used on working capital. So the difference is, again, economic injury disaster loans are basically to keep the business in business, to pay the ordinary and necessary operating expenses that the business could have paid for had the disaster not occurred. That includes the mortgage on the building, or if you rent, the rent, the inventory costs, machinery and equipment, the lights, quarterly taxes, any expenses that the business would have and would have been able to pay for had the disaster not occurred. Now, this does not include consolidating debts and refinancing them. It does not include expanding the business, and it would not include funds to start a new business or change operations. In other words, it's to keep the business as it was prior to the disaster's occurrence.
And so, Cathy, those are all great points. Is it still, I know that PPP, for instance, is looking at, from payroll purposes, sort of the next 2 months, right? Is that the same for the EIDL loan, or is it more focused on what your obligations are going to be over the next 3 months, 6 months, 8 months? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's more overall what the obligations and expenses are for the business over the next few months. It just depends on the loan officer talking to the individual as to how much working capital they're eligible for, but it's not restricted to just 2 months.
That's great, because that's a huge distinction, and I think small businesses will really, really benefit from that. So with that in mind, I wanted to do 2 things. First is, let me just remind everyone that if you do have a question, just email us at usblackchambers.org/cares-act. On our site, you'll see a form. You can just fill that in and just please share your questions with us. And I'm moving to our technical assistance resource slide, particularly to ask Lisa about not only the assistance, but for her to really give us an example of a business owner that she's worked with that's received that assistance, and that because of that, it has enabled them to get funding through these programs. So Lisa, can you share an example for us?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. And I would also want to point out that when you're talking about resources, that the businesses that are listening should not overlook the fact that within their own states and sometimes counties, there are business relief programs. That's not what we're talking about specifically here today, but I want to be sure that we don't lose sight that there might be additional resources for them very close to home.
Yeah, I can just to jump in very quickly on that. I know that in some cases some have run out, but it seems like every day there's new ones. I live in Charlotte,
exactly.
And so I am seeing, every day, a new program come online that is either serving a particular business need or is expanding upon, some resources that were already there. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and it really will reap tremendous benefits for businesses who have got a lot of things to juggle right now. But that's your question of an example. The Bowie BIC is a business accelerator, and we have technology companies that are part of our program, and we also have companies that are in the SBA 8A program. And one of our clients, who is both a technology company and a graduate of our 8A accelerator, when all of this started becoming available, because he was a client, I was letting all the clients know what needed to happen and how they could access this funding. And he literally jumped on it, and he applied. And in the first go-round of PPP funding, he was successful. And when he called me and said, I'm so happy. He said, I've just been notified by Bank of America that I've gotten a PPP loan, and it was so easy. And I said, well, why was it so easy? And he said, well, because I'd been in the accelerator, because I had been in the 8A accelerator as well, and because I'd also been to the SBDC counselor, I had all of my paperwork in order. And it took 15 minutes, he said, to fill out this form. And he said, but, you know, I really wouldn't have been able to do that if I had not kind of had you all bugging me in a nice way for months to basically get my financial house in order and keep it that way. So he was very successful in getting like a $60,000 loan because he has 5 employees, and now he's going to be able to hire an additional employee for a project that they weren't sure they could do, and he may be able to do some product development as well. And he is a cybersecurity company.
And
so that was like a great thing.
I'm sorry, did he get additional funds too locally in Maryland?
He actually did, and that's why I mentioned that that was on my mind when I first started speaking. Prince George's County, like many counties in the state of Maryland, and I think nationally, county level initiatives also provided some relief for commercial enterprises. And he, again, because he had all of his financials in order, as soon as he applied for the PPP, a week later our county came out with another option, and he applied for that, and he got an additional $10,000, I think, from the county to help him maintain his payroll and some of his operations. He also applied for an EIDL loan, and he received word that he had been approved for that. He also won, our county had a grant program and a loan program. He got both a grant and a loan. So he was very busy, but he said, I had all of the backup that I needed because I had been in counseling. You guys had looked at my financials, and you know, he said I was ready to go. So that, wow. I was really happy to see that. And I know what this is going to mean to his company because we have the unique way of looking into our companies as their clients. And I know that this will really help him grow and will provide a little peace of mind for him too, just at the moment, because like all the businesses in America, we're all struggling. We're going to come through this, but we are all at a little bit of a challenging point right now.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think it's great as we look at knowing that you can get assistance not only through the Bowie Business Innovation Center, but through small business development centers, certainly the U.S. Black Chambers. Our offices and our chamber leaders also provide those resources, and so I think it's just great that there are a lot of resources that are out there for folks so that you don't have to go this alone.
Alisa, one more comment I'd like to make too, and that is so here's I've talked about a company who's been very successful, and there have been many successful companies. There will be some that will not be able to access funding for various reasons. But the resources in place, the small business development centers, the women's business centers, the veteran outreach centers, you know, they are also in a unique position to help companies once they win this funding, once they're awarded these loans, because there's going to be planning that's going to be required for companies to really maximize these new funds so that their business growth really is a reality. And so I would also encourage your listeners to remember that these resources are good for after you have gotten your funding, as well as helping you win that funding.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, Lisa. We had our webinar last week. We featured one of our business owners. He's also vice chair of USBC, and one of the things he talked about was setting up a separate account once he got his funding, so that everything that he did relative to, and he got a PPP loan, relative to that program, they were able to track specifically in that. And I know Cathy talked a little bit earlier about what pieces are forgivable and what aren't. I think those kinds of tips and being able to work with a lot of these centers, I think, can really help our businesses be able to not only win funding, but also to be able to ensure reporting just based on how they set themselves up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, critically important, yes.
Absolutely. I'm going to move on to our next slide, slide 9, where we're talking about the Payroll Protection Loan Program. I just want to circle back on that a little bit. And either one of you can respond to this particular question. So this is just a reminder to our viewers of what that program is. We've been talking a lot earlier about the EIDL program because we wanted to make a distinction between the two. As you can see, it's really only around payroll expenses, and those expenses include salary and wages, commissions, cash tips, parental leave, vacation leave, health insurance premiums, and the like. And we gave an example, and I wanted to share that example because one of the most important things when folks are filling out these applications is that in order to hit that 75% of the loan that is forgivable on 2 months payroll and benefits expenses, you really got to do the math, right? And the math isn't hard, but you have to align to that. So in preparing for that, and either one of you can respond, what information is needed to go in to really calculate these payroll expenses over that 2.5-month period?
Lisa, I'll let you take that one if you would.
Okay. The most important thing, once you've decided to apply for a PPP, is you need the backup to help you with your calculations. And so I know that one of the requirements for, and let's talk about companies with employees, is you need to get your payroll company or your accountant or whoever you use to generate your financial information. You need to have a 940 or 941 form that will actually show what your payroll was and what you have paid taxes on, because that's going to be important for your application. So all the PPPs that we've seen, you need to have that kind of information that needs to correspond with the number that you are using in your calculation. So in the case of your slide here, they would need to have backup information to show that yes, the payroll cost was $10,000 for them to actually apply for this, and that is one of the documents that will be required for your loan, in addition to the loan application. But that's a key piece to have, and I think many people don't focus on that. And so that would be for companies that have employees. We have many companies in our community that are gig workers or they are independent contractors. The PPP works for them too, but they need to provide a little bit different information. They need to be able to show on their 2019 taxes from their Schedule C, their 1040 on line 31, what their net revenue is, and that's the number that they use. And so they're not in the same kind of boat as the folks that have employees, where they've actually paid a salary that's then been reported for tax purposes. What's going to count for the they need to show what their actual net revenue is, and that's the number that they use to do their calculation times 2.5. So that's two differences that we've seen.
Absolutely, and I know this week in particular, sole proprietors and independent contractors have the opportunity to apply this time, unlike the first round. And so I wanted to just kind of re-emphasize this because I think it's critically important for them to understand, for everyone to understand. When you sit down with right before you do your application, just collect your documents. Do some quick, calculations before that, and have them in front of you as you are preparing your application. So we're going to move along a little bit. I know that it's been a little tough, and particularly for folks who might not have a regular lending banking relationship. And so one of the things I wanted to do was just to highlight on this particular slide, slide 10, who our non-bank lenders are. So good news was that right before April 13th, I should say, there were a number of fintech lenders. And so those are your Squares and Intuits, PayPal folks who were companies that were approved by the SBA to provide lending during COVID. And that's a really key important point because A lot of banks, banks are in the business. I'm a former banker, and so we're in the business of knowing who our customer is. And so for the most part, they were lending to their existing customers. But if you only had a deposit relationship and not a real lending relationship, you might not be able to access those resources. So we wanted to provide additional information to let everyone know what else was out there. So in terms of non-bank lenders, particularly in our bank and non-bank lenders, particularly in the community, what I would call the community banking space and the fintech space, we do have black banks which are lending through the national, and you can go visit them at nationalbankers.org and search for member banks for a bank that's in your region. Credit unions are there. We have minority banks that you can find via the FDIC.gov. Community development financial institutions, or CDFIs. There are hundreds of them around the country, and so they are in the business of doing this type of lending in particular, working with small companies, working with diverse companies to ensure that they're able to receive financing. So you can go to the cdfi.treas.gov for that. This is part of the U.S. Treasury's program. It's been around for a number of years. And then, as I mentioned, for our fintech companies, there are 3 of them right now where you have to be an existing customer. So Square, Intuit, and PayPal are really only looking at their current customers right now. But Cabbage, LendingTree, OnDeck, and everyone else that you see on this slide is available to do lending during this time. And some of their advantages are, as we said, you don't have to be a customer. You can specialize in smaller loans, and they are SBA-approved lenders. So I just wanted to share that. Do any of you have any comments relative to that?
I have one comment, Elisa, and that is that I went through myself over the weekend looking at some of the applications for these groups, and they are asking for the exact same information that the PPP application request that SBA has on their website, and they also have sometimes some additional information that they want to have. So I would encourage people to look at the list of documents before you start your application, so that you've got, for example, a copy of your most recent bank statement in front of you, and that you can have make a color copy of your government ID or driver's license, for example, that can be uploaded to your application. So they're asking for some additional information that everybody's going to have, but if you have it all together, as you say, when you start, that's good. But check out at the beginning of all of these of all these fintech companies what their required documents are to save yourself some time.
I think that's great information. I put up a slide just to, again, reiterate the type of documentation that's needed. Cathy, I know we've talked a little bit about what the SBA is looking for from a documentation perspective and what you should have in front. One of the things we mentioned was tax returns, so as well as payroll records. So just for those, particularly those folks who are in the independent contractor, sole proprietor space, what documentation, if they were filing today, putting in an application, would they need to have?
Okay, with SBA PPP loans, they're going to have different things than they do for the economic injury loans. For the economic injury loans, we're going to ask them some information regarding, again, if they are Schedule C, we're going to ask them what their gross sales were. We're going to ask them what their cost of goods sold are, and their bottom line. If they're an independent contractor, then they're just going to put in their net income. The streamlined process that we have for the economic injury loans is very simple. It doesn't require a lot of data. Responses to questions such as how many employees you have, or if you're a sole proprietor, you just put one for yourself. If you have defaulted on federal debt, if you have any judgments against you, what kind of business you are, what kind of business activity do you have, all of those types of things are asked, and maybe if you have your banking account information, if you have the gross sales and the cost of goods sold, number of employees handy, the application shouldn't take you more than 30 minutes. Make sure that at the end, again, you want to check the box saying that you're interested in the advance, the $1,000 per employee up to $10,000 forgivable loan. And then you want to check that you're not a robot, read the statements, put in your banking information. That would be the name of your banking, your lender, whoever you use, and routing number, account number, and then read the statements. And if you certify everything's correct, then that's all that's required to begin the economic injury disaster loan. And then there's two components. The one is the advance, and the other part is the majority of the working capital that we are going to lend for the expenses that the business could have paid for had the disaster not occurred. And another bonus in applying for the economic injury disaster loan is you don't have to take it. You can just take the forgivable portion, the advance. If you do take the economic injury disaster loan also, then the first payment is not due for 1 year from the note date.
Oh, that's great information. I want to thank both of you so much for this. We're coming to the close, and I'd like to always make sure that we provide some tips for our business owners, whether it be the process itself, whether it be what happens once they receive their funding, or what it might mean as they're moving through this, through this difficult time, and plans. They had specific plans, and now they have to change them. They've got to retool a little bit. So, what thoughts do you all have as tips and takeaways as we look at that next slide that you'd love to share with everyone who's watching and listening?
The one thing that I want to say, other than what's on the slide, is don't count yourself out. You can work with a host of different people that will help you at no charge, that we've talked about several times, the small business development centers and SCORE and chambers, so forth. Even besides that, don't pretend that, I'm never going to get it, or it's not worth my time, or whatever. Apply for everything. This is an opportunity for recovery that is not always available, and everyone in the entire country is eligible. You can apply for the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loans as well as the Paycheck Protection Program. So don't count yourself out. Apply for everything that's out there, and let the lenders and let SBA determine what your eligibility is. And that would be my first line of advice.
Yeah, and I would just kind of follow up on that and say be proactive and just be alert to what's going on around you and the resources that are available to you, some of the things we've talked about today. I know this sounds crazy, but I would also encourage companies to make a plan for how do they want to use this unprecedented amount of support that the government is making available to them, as Cathy said. Have a plan for how you're going to use it, because you are going to need to factor in, as we said earlier, monitoring those expenses, but really take a little time to kind of plan, how can I really use this to not only maintain my business, but to accelerate the growth of my business. And I think that one of the things everyone has probably learned from this experience is that there's nothing quite like having a relationship with your bank. And even those companies that had relationships with their banks, I'm sure they're deeper now for having done this. And the ones that maybe could do a better job, I would encourage them in the times ahead, regardless of whether they win, that they're successful in winning a grant or a loan, that they make that a priority, that they really make their bank their partner in business.
Well, again, I just want to thank you both for taking time today to participate in this wonderful discussion. I really appreciate everything you shared, and the fact that you're helping firms who are really having a difficult time get through it. And so thank you so much again for your wisdom, for your expertise, and your counsel. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so our next webinar is going to be Retooling Your Business, E-Commerce Solutions Storefront. And that's going to be next Thursday at 2 p.m. We all know that so many of us who may have had a storefront, who may have been had customers walking in off the street, now have to do something a little bit differently. And so we're going to have Square with us talking about the ways to be able to manage through this and some of the new tools, free tools in particular, they have for business owners. So please join us next week for that. All of our webinar sessions are available on demand, so you can access them at any time. And as we move to our webinar slides, just want to let you see the next few things that are coming up. And as we close today, please visit us again at usblackchambers.org/CARES-Act for updated information on EIDL, PPP, and other COVID-19 issues. We always encourage you, if you're not a member, please consider becoming one today so you can continue to receive valuable information beyond just what we're doing for webinars from USBC. So until the next time, please enjoy your day and stay safe.